The steady drip of water echoed through absolute darkness, 30 feet beneath the streets of Berlin. In the cramped chamber, barely 6 feet in diameter, American technician Robert Miller adjusted his headphones and listened to voices speaking in Russian, their words carrying secrets that could reshape the Cold War. Above him, East German guards patrolled the death strip, unaware that beneath their boots lay one of the most audacious espionage operations ever conceived. The date was March 15, 1955, and Miller was part of a team intercepting every telephone call, every telegraph message flowing between Moscow and its European satellites through the arteries of a divided city. The walls around him were lined with 125 tons of steel, forming a tunnel that stretched 1,476 feet beneath the earth. From the American sector of West Berlin, deep into the heart of Soviet-controlled East Berlin, this was Operation Gold, a joint venture between the Central Intelligence Agency and MI6 that would produce 50,000 reels of magnetic tape, 443,000 transcribed conversations, and intelligence reports that would fill rooms in Washington and London. Yet even as Miller listened to Soviet officers discussing troop movements and atomic secrets, he had no idea that every word he heard had already been compromised by a traitor sitting in the offices of British intelligence. The story of the Berlin Tunnel begins not in the rubble of post-war Germany, but in the corridors of power, where men in dark suits made calculations about survival in an atomic age. The year was 1953, and the world had already witnessed the terrible potential of nuclear warfare. The Soviet Union had detonated its first atomic bomb 4 years earlier, shattering American assumptions about technological superiority. China had fallen to the communists, and the Korean War had demonstrated that the Cold War could turn hot with devastating consequences. In this environment of existential anxiety, intelligence became the most precious commodity, and Berlin emerged as the focal point where East met West in a delicate dance of espionage and counter-espionage. The mandate for Operation Gold came from the highest levels of both governments. President Dwight Eisenhower had made it clear that understanding Soviet intentions was paramount to American survival. His doctrine of massive retaliation required precise intelligence about Soviet military capabilities and strategic thinking. Without this knowledge, the United States risked either launching a preemptive strike based on false assumptions or failing to respond to genuine threats until it was too late. The stakes could not have been higher, as both superpowers possessed the ability to destroy civilization itself. In London, the leadership of MI6 faced similar pressures. Britain, devastated by 2 world wars and struggling to maintain its position as a global power, desperately needed intelligence to navigate the shifting landscape of international relations. The Special Intelligence Service, as MI6 was formerly known, had been caught off guard by the speed of Soviet nuclear development and the effectiveness of communist intelligence operations in Britain itself. The revelation that Klaus Fuchs had passed atomic secrets to Moscow had shaken confidence in British security, and there was an urgent need to demonstrate that Britain could still contribute meaningfully to the intelligence war against the Soviet Union. The political pressures were immense and deeply personal. For the men tasked with gathering intelligence, Allen Dulles, who had taken over as Director of Central Intelligence in February 1953, brought with him the swagger and ambition of a man who had run Office of Strategic Services operations behind Nazi lines during World War II. Dulles believed that the CIA needed to be bold, innovative, and willing to take enormous risks to stay ahead of Soviet intelligence. He had seen how the Nazis had been defeated through a combination of traditional military force and unconventional operations, and he was determined to apply the same principles to the struggle against communism. The mission was framed not simply as intelligence gathering, but as an essential component of national survival. In classified briefings to congressional leaders, Dulles emphasized that the Soviet Union was planning for global domination, and that only through superior intelligence Could the free world hope to prevent nuclear catastrophe? The language used in these briefings was deliberately stark, painting a picture of a world divided between freedom and tyranny, with Berlin serving as the symbolic and practical front line of this struggle. For the British, the operation represented an opportunity to reassert their relevance in the intelligence world. Sir John Sinclair, who had taken over as head of MI6 in 1952, was acutely aware that Britain's diminished economic and military power meant that intelligence cooperation with the Americans was essential for maintaining any meaningful influence in global affairs. The Berlin Tunnel offered a chance to demonstrate that British technical expertise and local knowledge could complement American resources and ambition in ways that would benefit both nations. The political doctrine underlying the operation was built on several key assumptions about the nature of the Cold War conflict. First, both sides accepted that direct military confrontation between the superpowers would likely result in mutual annihilation, making intelligence the primary battlefield for competition. Second, they believed that the Soviet system was inherently aggressive and expansionist, requiring constant vigilance and preemptive action to contain. Third, they assumed that technological superiority could provide decisive advantages in intelligence gathering, and that bold operations could yield information that would be impossible to obtain through conventional diplomatic or espionage channels. The operational mandate given to the teams in Berlin was remarkably broad. They were instructed to intercept and analyze all Soviet and East German communications passing through Berlin, with particular attention to military communications that might reveal Soviet intentions regarding Western Europe. The intelligence gathered would be used to assess Soviet military capabilities, identify potential targets for Western operations, and provide early warning of any Soviet plans for military action against the West. The operation was also expected to provide insight into the internal dynamics of the Soviet system, including tensions between Moscow and its Eastern European satellites. Frank Rowlett, the National Security Agency's liaison to the CIA, understood better than most the technical challenges involved in the operation. A veteran cryptanalyst who had helped break Japanese codes during World War II, Rowlett knew that intercepting communications was only the first step in a complex process that would require sophisticated equipment, skilled linguists, and careful analysis. The NSA had already established that Soviet communications in Berlin used a mixture of encrypted and unencrypted channels, suggesting that valuable intelligence could be obtained if the technical challenges could be overcome. The British brought their own expertise to the planning process, particularly in the area of communications interception. MI6 had been running smaller-scale tapping operations in Berlin since the late 1940s, and they had developed sophisticated techniques for accessing underground cables without detection. Their experience suggested that a larger-scale operation was not only feasible, but could provide intelligence that would justify the enormous risks and costs involved. The leadership of both organizations understood that failure would have consequences far beyond the loss of intelligence. If the operation were discovered, it would provide the Soviets with a major propaganda victory and could seriously damage relationships between the Western Allies and the West German government. The political risks were enormous, but so were the potential benefits of success. As planning progressed through 1953 and into early 1954, the scope and ambition of the operation continued to expand. What had begun as a relatively modest proposal to tap a few communication lines had evolved into a plan to intercept virtually all Soviet communications passing through Berlin. The technical requirements grew correspondingly complex, requiring the construction of sophisticated facilities that could operate undetected for months or years. The decision to proceed with Operation Gold was ultimately made in January 1954, when Allen Dulles gave his formal approval to the plan. By that time, the operation had consumed hundreds of hours of planning by specialists from both the CIA and MI6, and preliminary work had already begun in Berlin. The commitment was total, representing not just a significant investment of resources, but a fundamental bet on the future of intelligence cooperation between Britain and America. The tradecraft required for Operation Gold represented the cutting edge of Cold War espionage technology and technique. At its heart, the operation depended on the ability to access and monitor telephone and telegraph cables that carried Soviet communications between Moscow and Eastern European capitals. These cables ran beneath the streets of Berlin, protected by layers of concrete, steel, and soil, and monitored by East German security forces who understood their strategic importance. The technical challenges were formidable. The cables themselves were buried approximately 18 inches below the surface, but accessing them required digging a tunnel that would be deep enough to avoid detection by surface patrols, while remaining shallow enough to allow technicians to work effectively. The tunnel would need to extend nearly 1,500 feet from the American sector into East Berlin, requiring precise surveying and construction techniques to ensure that it reached the correct location without breaking the surface or causing detectable vibrations. The surveillance requirements for the preliminary phase of the operation stretched over more than a year. CIA operatives, working undercover as members of the United States Air Force, conducted detailed reconnaissance of the target area throughout 1953. They photographed every building, mapped every street, and carefully documented the patterns of East German patrols. This surveillance revealed that the target cables were located beneath a cemetery in the East Berlin district of Alt-Klinik, providing both an opportunity and additional complications for the operation. The cemetery location offered significant advantages for concealment, as the area was relatively quiet during most hours, and the presence of burial sites meant that any unusual ground disturbance might be attributed to normal cemetery activities. However, the location also presented technical challenges, as the loose soil of graveyards could make tunnel construction more difficult and increase the risk of collapse. The surveillance teams spent months studying soil conditions, weather patterns, and the schedules of cemetery workers to develop a comprehensive understanding of the operational environment. One of the most significant surveillance discoveries was made in August 1953, when CIA technician James Carlton, working undercover as a communications specialist at the American radar facility in Rudo, succeeded in identifying the exact location of the main Soviet communications cable. Carlton had spent weeks using specialized electronic equipment to trace the path of the cable from known connection points, and his work provided the precise coordinates that would guide tunnel construction. This breakthrough represented months of patient technical work, much of it conducted within yards of East German border guards, who remained unaware of the intelligence operation taking place almost beneath their feet. The British contribution to the surveillance effort focused on communications interception and analysis. MI6 technicians, led by Peter Lunn, established a series of listening posts in West Berlin that allowed them to monitor Soviet radio communications and identify patterns in telephone and telegraph traffic. This work revealed that the Soviets were indeed using the Berlin cables for communications that included military planning, intelligence reports, and political discussions that would be of enormous value to Western analysts. By early 1954, the surveillance phase had produced a detailed operational plan that addressed most of the technical and security challenges involved in the operation. The tunnel would begin in a specially constructed warehouse in the American sector, extend beneath the border, and terminate in a chamber positioned directly beneath the target cables. Construction would be carried out by a team of American military engineers working under the direction of CIA technical specialists, with British MI6 providing expertise in communications interception and analysis. The surveillance data also revealed important information about East German security measures in the target area. Border guards conducted regular patrols along the sector boundary, but their routes were predictable and their equipment was relatively unsophisticated. The East Germans had installed some electronic monitoring devices along the border, but these appeared to be focused on detecting surface movements rather than underground activity. This intelligence suggested that a carefully planned tunnel operation could proceed without detection, provided that construction activities were properly concealed and operational security was maintained. One particularly valuable piece of surveillance intelligence came from CIA operative Sarah Morrison, who had established herself as a frequent visitor to the Alt-Glinick cemetery under the cover of researching German war graves. Morrison's work allowed her to study the target area in detail, mapping the exact locations of graves, utility connections, and drainage systems that might affect tunnel construction. Her reports provided crucial information about soil conditions and identified several potential problems that might have caused the operation to fail if they had not been discovered during the planning phase. The surveillance teams also conducted detailed studies of Soviet communications security procedures, analyzing patterns in encrypted and unencrypted traffic to understand how different types of information were transmitted through the Berlin cables. This analysis revealed that while high-level military and political communications were typically encrypted, a significant amount of valuable intelligence was transmitted in clear text or using codes that could be broken with sufficient time and effort. The volume of unencrypted traffic was particularly surprising to Western analysts, suggesting that Soviet communications security was not as sophisticated as had been previously assumed. Technical surveillance of the construction site revealed additional challenges that would need to be addressed during the operational phase. The water table in the area was higher than initially estimated, meaning that the tunnel would need to be waterproofed more extensively than originally planned. The presence of other utility lines in the area also created potential complications, as damage to gas or electrical lines could attract unwanted attention from East German repair crews. These discoveries led to modifications in the construction plan that would add both cost and complexity to the operation, but were essential for ensuring its success. The final phase of surveillance involved testing the equipment and techniques that would be used during the operational phase. CIA technicians conducted extensive trials of recording equipment, power systems, and communications gear to ensure that everything would function reliably in the difficult conditions of the underground chamber. These tests revealed several equipment failures that required design modifications and led to the development of backup systems that would ensure continuity of operations, even if primary equipment failed. By the time surveillance was complete, the operation had consumed thousands of hours of work by specialists from both the CIA and MI6. The intelligence gathered during this phase would prove crucial to the success of the tunnel construction and operation, providing the detailed knowledge necessary to carry out one of the most ambitious intelligence operations of the Cold War. The heart of Operation Gold lay in 3 meticulously planned operations that would demonstrate the extraordinary lengths to which intelligence agencies would go to penetrate Soviet communications networks. Each operation built upon the previous one, creating a cascade of technical achievements that pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible in the world of espionage. The first operation, designated Phase Alpha, involved the construction of a cover facility that would conceal the tunnel entrance and provide operational security for the entire project. Beginning in March 1954, construction crews, working under the direction of the United States Air Force, began building what appeared to be a standard military communications facility in the Rudow district of West Berlin. The building was designed to house radar equipment and communications gear, providing a plausible explanation for the presence of military personnel and the large amounts of electrical power that would be required for the tunnel operation. The construction of the cover facility required extraordinary attention to detail, as it needed to function both as a genuine military installation and as the headquarters for a major espionage operation. The building included offices, barracks, a dining facility, and workshops that would appear normal to casual observers, while concealing the entrance to the tunnel system and housing the sophisticated recording and analysis equipment that would be used to process intercepted communications. The basement of the facility was excavated to a depth of 20 feet, providing space for storing the enormous amounts of soil that would be removed during tunnel construction. The engineering challenges of Phase Alpha were complicated by the need to maintain operational security while carrying out large-scale construction activities in full view of East German observation posts. American engineers developed innovative techniques for concealing the true nature of the work, including the use of specially designed trucks that could transport soil and construction materials without revealing the quantities involved. The construction schedule was carefully coordinated with other military activities in the area to ensure that the increased traffic and activity would not attract unwanted attention. The second major operation, Phase Beta, involved the actual construction of the tunnel itself. Beginning in September 1954, a team of American military engineers, working in 8-hour shifts, began the painstaking process of excavating a tunnel that would eventually extend 1,476 feet beneath the streets of Berlin. The work was carried out using a technique known as shield tunneling, in which a protective steel framework was pushed forward as excavation proceeded, allowing workers to operate safely in unstable soil conditions. The tunneling work required extraordinary precision and patience. Workers could excavate only a few feet per day, as each section of tunnel had to be carefully surveyed to ensure that it remained on course and at the correct depth. The tunnel was lined with heavy steel plates that were bolted together to form rings, approximately 6 feet in diameter, creating a continuous tube that could withstand the weight of the soil above while providing space for workers and equipment. The steel lining consumed 125 tons of material, representing a significant engineering achievement in itself. One of the most challenging aspects of Phase Beta was the disposal of excavated soil. The tunnel construction removed over 3,000 tons of earth, an amount that could not be disposed of without attracting attention. The solution involved creating a specially designed storage area in the basement of the cover facility, where soil could be stored temporarily before being removed in small quantities that would not reveal the scale of the excavation. This process required careful coordination between the tunneling crews and the facility management to ensure that soil removal activities did not compromise operational security. The tunneling work was complicated by the discovery of underground obstacles that had not been detected during the surveillance phase. In December 1954, workers encountered a concrete foundation from a building that had been destroyed during World War II, requiring a modification to the tunnel route that added several weeks to the construction schedule. In January 1955, the tunnel broke through into a pocket of groundwater that had to be sealed before work could continue, leading to the installation of additional pumping equipment and waterproofing materials. The third major operation, Phase Gamma, involved the installation of the communications interception equipment and the beginning of active intelligence gathering. This phase required the construction of a specialized chamber at the end of the tunnel, positioned directly beneath the target cables, where British MI6 technicians would install the sophisticated recording and monitoring equipment needed to intercept Soviet communications. The chamber construction presented unique technical challenges, as it needed to provide sufficient space for equipment and technicians while remaining completely undetectable from the surface. The chamber was excavated to a diameter of approximately 8 feet and lined with steel plates similar to those used in the tunnel itself. Electrical power was provided through cables that ran the entire length of the tunnel, connected to diesel generators in the cover facility that could operate independently of the Berlin electrical grid. The communications interception equipment installed in the chamber represented the most advanced technology available to Western intelligence agencies in 1955. The system included multiple recording devices that could simultaneously monitor dozens of telephone and telegraph circuits, along with amplification and filtering equipment that could isolate individual conversations from the complex mixture of signals carried by the cables. The entire system was designed to operate continuously for months at a time, with minimal maintenance required from technicians who would need to access the chamber through the narrow tunnel. The cable tapping operation itself required extraordinary technical skill and precision. British technicians, working in the cramped conditions of the underground chamber, carefully attached monitoring devices to the Soviet cables without interrupting the flow of communications or creating detectable changes in signal strength. The tapping technique involved the use of inductive pickups that could intercept electromagnetic signals from the cables without making direct physical contact, ensuring that the interception would be virtually undetectable using the monitoring equipment available to Soviet technicians. The installation of the tapping equipment was completed in early May 1955, and Operation Gold began producing intelligence almost immediately. The first intercepts revealed the extraordinary volume of communications passing through the Berlin cables, with hundreds of telephone conversations and telegraph messages being transmitted every hour. The intelligence value of this material exceeded even the optimistic projections made during the planning phase, providing Western analysts with unprecedented insight into Soviet military planning, intelligence operations, and political decision-making. Each of these three operations required months of preparation and the coordination of hundreds of personnel from multiple agencies and organizations. The technical achievements represented by Operation Gold would influence intelligence operations for decades to come, establishing new standards for the scale and sophistication of covert operations. The success of these operations demonstrated that with sufficient planning, resources, and technical expertise, intelligence agencies could overcome seemingly impossible obstacles to gather vital information about adversary activities and intentions. The operational techniques that made Operation Gold possible represented a revolution in intelligence tradecraft, combining traditional espionage methods with cutting-edge technology and engineering capabilities. The operation required the development of entirely new approaches to covert construction, communications interception, and operational security that would influence intelligence operations throughout the Cold War and beyond. The excavation technique used for the tunnel construction was adapted from mining and civil engineering methods, but required significant modifications to meet the unique requirements of a covert operation. Traditional tunneling methods would have produced too much noise and vibration, potentially alerting East German security forces to the underground activity. Instead, American engineers developed a modified shield tunneling technique that used hydraulic jacks to slowly push the protective framework forward, while workers excavated small amounts of soil at a time. The shield itself was a masterpiece of engineering, constructed from heavy steel plates and designed to protect workers from cave-ins, while providing a stable platform for excavation activities. The shield was equipped with hydraulic systems that could exert tremendous force to push through obstacles, along with ventilation equipment that could provide fresh air to workers operating in the confined space of the tunnel. The entire system was designed to operate as quietly as possible, with special attention paid to reducing mechanical noise that might be detected by surface monitoring equipment. The soil removal technique, developed for Operation Gold, became a model for future covert construction projects. Rather than using traditional excavation equipment that would have been impossible to conceal, workers used hand tools and small mechanical devices to remove soil in manageable quantities. The excavated material was loaded into specially designed containers that could be transported through the narrow tunnel and stored in the basement of the cover facility. This process was labor-intensive and time-consuming, but it allowed the operation to proceed without creating the obvious signs of large-scale construction that would have compromised operational security. The steel lining system used in the tunnel was specifically designed to meet the requirements of the operation. Each section of lining was manufactured to precise specifications and designed to interlock with adjacent sections to create a continuous tube that could withstand significant soil pressure while providing access for workers and equipment. The lining sections were transported to the site in small quantities and assembled underground, requiring workers to develop specialized techniques for handling heavy steel components in the confined space of the tunnel. The ventilation system for the tunnel represented another significant technical achievement, as it needed to provide fresh air to workers while remaining completely undetectable from the surface. The system used a series of small fans and air ducts that could circulate air throughout the tunnel without creating detectable air currents or noise at the surface. The ventilation equipment was powered by the same electrical system that provided power for lighting and communications equipment, requiring careful coordination between different technical systems. The communications interception techniques used in Operation Gold were based on methods that had been developed during World War II, but required significant adaptation for the specific requirements of the Berlin operation. The Soviet cables carried a complex mixture of telephone, telegraph, and radio communications, each requiring different interception and recording techniques. British MI6 technicians developed specialized equipment that could simultaneously monitor multiple circuits while maintaining the signal quality necessary for intelligence analysis. The recording system used magnetic tape technology that was relatively new in 1955, but provided the capacity and reliability necessary for continuous operation over extended periods. The system included multiple recording devices that could operate simultaneously, along with automatic switching equipment that could redirect recording activities if individual devices failed. The entire system was designed to operate with minimal human supervision, as technicians could access the underground chamber only during scheduled maintenance periods. The power supply system for the operation required careful engineering to provide reliable electricity to equipment located nearly 1,500 feet from the nearest power source. The system used heavy-duty cables that ran the entire length of the tunnel, connected to diesel generators that could operate independently of the Berlin electrical grid. The generators were housed in the cover facility and equipped with sound dampening equipment to reduce noise that might attract attention from neighboring buildings. The operational security techniques developed for Operation Gold established new standards for protecting large-scale covert operations from detection and compromise. The operation required the coordination of hundreds of personnel over a period of more than 2 years, presenting enormous challenges for maintaining secrecy and preventing leaks that could compromise the entire project. The security procedures developed for the operation included compartmentalization of information, regular security briefings, and continuous monitoring of personnel to identify potential security risks. The cover and deception activities used to conceal the true nature of the operation were carefully coordinated with other American military activities in Berlin. The cover facility was integrated into the existing network of American installations in the city, and its activities were designed to appear consistent with normal military communications and radar operations. The personnel assigned to the operation were provided with plausible cover stories and documentation that would withstand casual scrutiny from East German intelligence services. The intelligence analysis techniques used to process the enormous volume of material produced by Operation Gold required the development of new methods for handling and analyzing intercepted communications. The operation produced thousands of hours of recorded conversations and telegraph messages, requiring teams of linguists, analysts, and technical specialists to extract useful intelligence from the raw intercept material. The analysis process included translation of Russian and German language communications, identification of key personalities and organizations, and correlation of intelligence from multiple sources to develop comprehensive assessments of Soviet activities and intentions. The techniques developed for Operation Gold had lasting influence on intelligence operations throughout the Cold War period. The engineering methods used for covert construction were applied to similar operations in other locations, while the communications interception techniques influenced the development of signals intelligence capabilities that remain important to this day. The operational security procedures developed for the operation established standards that were used to protect other major covert operations, and the intelligence analysis methods helped establish modern approaches to processing and exploiting intercepted communications. The economy and politics of Operation Gold revealed the extraordinary costs and complex relationships that underpinned major intelligence operations during the Cold War era. The financial requirements of the operation stretched the budgets of both the CIA and MI6, while the political implications affected relationships between intelligence agencies, military organizations, and government leaders on both sides of the Atlantic. The total cost of Operation Gold has never been officially disclosed, but declassified documents and historical analyses suggest that the operation consumed tens of millions of dollars in 1954 and 1955 currency values. The expense was driven by multiple factors, including the need for specialized equipment, the construction of elaborate cover facilities, and the salaries and support costs for hundreds of personnel who worked on various aspects of the operation. The CIA bore the majority of the financial burden, reflecting both American economic advantages and the priority that American leaders placed on intelligence gathering in the Cold War environment. The construction costs alone were enormous, requiring the purchase and transportation of hundreds of tons of steel, concrete, and specialized equipment. The steel lining for the tunnel was manufactured to precise specifications and shipped to Berlin in small quantities to avoid attracting attention, adding significantly to the overall cost. The excavation equipment, power systems, and communications gear all required custom modifications for the unique requirements of the operation, further increasing expenses. The cover facility required its own substantial investment, including the construction of buildings, installation of legitimate radar and communications equipment, and the creation of supporting infrastructure that would make the facility appear authentic to outside observers. The personnel costs represented another major category of expense, as the operation required specialists from multiple organizations and disciplines. The CIA provided project management, security, and analytical personnel, while the military contributed engineering and construction expertise. MI6 supplied communications, interception specialists, and linguists, along with analytical support for processing intercepted material. The National Security Agency provided cryptographic expertise and technical support for handling encrypted communications. All of these personnel required security clearances, specialized training, and extended assignments in Berlin, adding to the overall cost of the operation. The logistics of supporting Operation Gold in Berlin created additional financial burdens, as equipment and personnel had to be transported across the Atlantic and through the complex political environment of divided Germany. The operation required its own supply chain for specialized equipment and materials, including items that could not be obtained through normal military procurement channels. The need for operational security meant that many purchases had to be made through cover organizations or intermediaries, adding layers of expense and complexity to routine transactions. The political costs of Operation Gold were equally significant, though more difficult to quantify in financial terms. The operation required high-level political approval from both American and British leaders, involving presidents, prime ministers, and senior cabinet officials in decisions about covert activities that could have major diplomatic consequences. The political risks were enormous, as discovery of the operation could have damaged relationships with West German allies, provided propaganda advantages to the Soviet Union, and undermined public confidence in intelligence agencies. The prisoner exchange mechanisms that developed during the Cold War period provided important context for understanding the broader political economy of intelligence operations, like Operation Gold. While the Berlin Tunnel operation itself did not directly involve prisoner exchanges, the intelligence gathered through the operation contributed to the broader currency of Cold War diplomacy, where information, personnel, and political concessions were traded in complex arrangements that reflected the balance of power between East and West. The propaganda value of Operation Gold became apparent when the Soviets discovered the tunnel in April 1956 and decided to publicize their discovery rather than quietly shutting down the operation. The Soviet decision to hold a press conference and invite international journalists to tour the tunnel represented a calculated attempt to embarrass the United States and Britain while demonstrating Soviet vigilance against Western espionage activities. However, the propaganda campaign largely backfired as international media coverage focused more on the technical audacity and engineering sophistication of the operation than on Soviet complaints about Western espionage. The legal implications of Operation Gold raised complex questions about the status of covert operations under international law and the agreements governing the occupation of Berlin. The operation clearly violated East German sovereignty and Soviet control over the eastern sector of the city, but it was conducted under the authority of military commanders who claimed the right to take necessary measures for the security of their forces and areas of responsibility. The legal ambiguities reflected the broader uncertainties of the Cold War period, when traditional concepts of sovereignty and international law were complicated by the division of Germany and the ongoing state of tension between former wartime allies. The diplomatic consequences of Operation Gold extended far beyond the immediate embarrassment caused by its discovery. The operation contributed to Soviet perceptions of Western intentions and influenced subsequent decisions about intelligence operations, arms control negotiations, and political relationships in Europe. The intelligence gathered through the tunnel provided Western leaders with detailed information about Soviet military capabilities and political thinking, but it also demonstrated to Soviet leaders the extent to which Western intelligence agencies were willing to go to penetrate Soviet communications and decision-making processes. The relationship between Operation Gold and other intelligence activities of the period illustrated the complex web of covert operations, diplomatic initiatives, and military preparations that characterized Cold War competition. The intelligence gathered through the tunnel was combined with information from other sources to provide comprehensive assessments of Soviet activities and intentions, while the operational techniques developed for the tunnel were applied to other intelligence gathering activities around the world. The operation was part of a broader pattern of intelligence competition that consumed enormous resources on both sides and contributed to the escalating tensions of the Cold War period. The long-term economic impact of Operation Gold extended beyond the immediate costs of the operation itself, influencing budget allocations, organizational priorities, and technological development within the intelligence community for years to come. The success of the operation encouraged both the CIA and MI6 to invest in similar technical intelligence gathering capabilities, leading to the development of increasingly sophisticated methods for intercepting communications and gathering information about adversary activities. The operational experience gained through Operation Gold provided valuable lessons for managing large-scale covert operations and influenced the planning and execution of subsequent intelligence activities throughout the Cold War period. The turning point for Operation Gold came not through Soviet detection or technical failure, but through the careful orchestration of a discovery that had been planned from the very beginning by those who possessed the operation's most closely guarded secrets. The collapse of the tunnel operation on April 21, 1956, represented a masterpiece of intelligence theater, performed for an international audience that remained largely unaware of the true dynamics at play beneath the streets of Berlin. The morning of April 21st began like any other for the American and British technicians monitoring Soviet communications from their underground chamber. The spring of 1956 had been unusually wet, causing problems with telephone and telegraph lines throughout Berlin, and repair crews from both sectors had been working to address various technical difficulties. At 7:30 in the morning, local time, Lieutenant Colonel Ivan Kotyuba of the Soviet Army received orders to investigate reported problems with underground cables in the Alt-Glienicke Cemetery, a routine assignment that would supposedly lead to the accidental discovery of one of the West's most ambitious intelligence operations. The choreography of the discovery had been planned months in advance by the K.G.B. in consultation with George Blake, the MI6 officer whose betrayal had compromised Operation Gold from its earliest planning stages. Blake, a seemingly loyal British intelligence officer who had been recruited by the Soviets during his captivity in North Korea, had provided detailed information about every aspect of the tunnel operation, including its location, technical capabilities, and operational schedule. The K.G.B. had used this information not to immediately shut down the operation, but to develop a sophisticated strategy for exploiting the tunnel for their own purposes, while preparing for its eventual exposure. The decision to allow Operation Gold to continue for nearly a year after the Soviets learned of its existence reflected careful calculation about the intelligence value that could be derived from the operation. Soviet communication specialists had identified most of the circuits being monitored by the tunnel and had developed procedures for controlling the information transmitted over those lines, rather than cutting off all communications through the tapped circuits, which would have immediately revealed their knowledge of the operation. The Soviets chose to continue using the circuits while carefully managing the intelligence that Western analysts would receive. The controlled information campaign, conducted by the Soviets through the compromised circuits, represented one of the most sophisticated deception operations of the Cold War period. Soviet military and intelligence officers transmitted a mixture of genuine and fabricated information, designed to provide Western analysts with intelligence that appeared valuable, while avoiding the disclosure of truly sensitive information about Soviet capabilities and intentions. The deception campaign required extraordinary coordination between different Soviet organizations and demonstrated a level of strategic thinking about intelligence operations that surprised Western analysts when it was eventually discovered. The timing of the tunnel's discovery was carefully chosen to maximize its propaganda value while minimizing damage to Soviet interests. By April 1956, the Soviets had achieved most of their objectives through the deception campaign and were ready to expose the operation in a way that would embarrass the Western intelligence agencies, while protecting George Blake and other Soviet intelligence assets. The decision to frame the discovery as an accidental result of routine maintenance work was designed to preserve Blake's cover and avoid revealing the extent of Soviet penetration of British intelligence. The actual discovery process was carefully staged to provide maximum impact for international media coverage. Soviet and East German engineers began excavating at the cemetery at precisely 7:45 on the morning of April 21st, working systematically toward the point where they knew the tunnel chamber was located. The excavation was conducted with unusual numbers of observers present, including Soviet military officers, East German security officials, and Communist Party representatives who had been alerted in advance that an important discovery was imminent. The moment of discovery itself was anticlimactic from a technical perspective, as the Soviet engineers simply uncovered the steel chamber that housed the British communications equipment and immediately recognized it as a sophisticated intelligence gathering facility. However, the political and propaganda implications of the discovery became immediately apparent, as Soviet officials began preparing for an international press conference that would expose the operation to the world. The decision to publicize the discovery, rather than quietly shutting down the operation, reflected Soviet confidence that the revelation would provide significant propaganda advantages while avoiding serious retaliation from Western intelligence agencies. The internal reactions within the Soviet intelligence community revealed important information about the dynamics of the Cold War intelligence competition. K.G.B. officers, who had been aware of the tunnel operation from its beginning, expressed satisfaction that their patience and strategic thinking had been vindicated, while military officers, who had been unknowingly transmitting information through compromised circuits, were embarrassed and angry about the deception that had been practiced against them. The discovery provided an opportunity for the K.G.B. to demonstrate its sophistication and effectiveness to other components of the Soviet government. strengthening its position in bureaucratic competitions for resources and authority. The immediate consequences of the discovery extended far beyond the shutdown of the tunnel operation itself. Within hours of the discovery, Soviet and East German security forces had sealed off the area around the cemetery and begun a comprehensive investigation of the tunnel and its associated facilities. The investigation revealed the extraordinary scale and sophistication of the operation, providing Soviet intelligence with detailed information about Western technical capabilities and operational methods that would influence their planning for future intelligence operations. The Western response to the discovery reflected the complex mixture of disappointment, embarrassment, and pride that characterized reactions to the exposure of major covert operations. CIA and MI6 officers who had worked on the operation were devastated by its premature termination, but they were also proud of the technical achievements and intelligence successes that had been accomplished during the 11 months of active operation. The intelligence community leadership faced the difficult task of assessing the damage caused by the exposure while defending the operation's achievements and planning for similar activities in the future. The public mood in both East and West Berlin reflected the broader tensions of the Cold War period, as residents of the divided city struggled to understand the implications of the tunnel operation for their own security and future prospects. East Berlin residents were officially informed that the tunnel represented evidence of Western aggression and espionage, while West Berlin residents were told that the operation demonstrated Western determination to gather intelligence about Soviet activities and intentions. The contrasting narratives reflected the broader propaganda war that accompanied every aspect of Cold War competition. The timeline of the collapse unfolded with remarkable speed, as news of the discovery spread through diplomatic channels and international media within hours of the initial excavation. By the evening of April 21st, representatives from multiple countries were demanding explanations from American and British officials, while Soviet representatives were preparing detailed presentations about the operation for use in international forums. The rapid pace of events reflected the high level of international attention focused on Berlin and the broader Cold War competition. The fractures within the Western alliance that became apparent following the discovery revealed the ongoing tensions between different national approaches to intelligence operations and international relations. British officials were particularly concerned about the implications of the exposure for their relationships with European allies, while American officials focused more on the intelligence losses and the need to prevent similar compromises in the future. These different perspectives reflected broader disagreements about intelligence priorities and operational methods that would continue throughout the Cold War period. The aftermath of Operation Gold stretched across decades, reshaping intelligence practices, international relations, and historical memory in ways that continue to influence understanding of Cold War espionage and the complex relationship between secrecy and democracy in modern society. The immediate consequences of the tunnel's discovery rippled through intelligence agencies, government bureaucracies, and public consciousness on both sides of the Iron Curtain, while the long-term implications affected everything from technical intelligence gathering methods to popular culture representations of espionage activities. The archival revelations that followed the end of the Cold War provided unprecedented insight into the true nature and impact of Operation Gold, fundamentally altering historical understanding of the operation and its significance. The opening of Soviet archives in the 1990s revealed the extent of George Blake's betrayal and the sophisticated deception campaign that had been conducted through the compromised tunnel. These revelations showed that while the Soviets had known about the tunnel from its inception, they had not simply fed false information through the tapped circuits, but had instead conducted a careful information management campaign designed to protect their most sensitive secrets while allowing Western analysts to receive intelligence that appeared genuine and valuable. The declassification of American and British documents in subsequent decades provided additional perspective on the operation's planning, execution, and aftermath. These documents revealed the internal debates within intelligence agencies about the operation's value, the technical challenges that had been overcome during its construction and operation, and the lessons learned from its eventual exposure. The declassified materials also showed the extent to which Operation Gold had influenced subsequent intelligence operations, providing both technical innovations and operational insights that were applied to other covert activities throughout the Cold War period. The personal reckonings experienced by individuals who had participated in Operation Gold reflected the broader moral and professional challenges faced by intelligence officers during the Cold War era. Many of the American and British personnel who had worked on the operation spent years wondering whether their efforts had been worthwhile, given the eventual revelation that the Soviets had been aware of the tunnel from its beginning. The discovery that George Blake had betrayed the operation raised painful questions about trust, loyalty, and the effectiveness of security procedures within intelligence organizations. The museum exhibitions and educational programs that have featured Operation Gold since the end of the Cold War have helped to preserve public memory of the operation, while providing opportunities for reflection on its broader significance. The C.I.A. Museum at Langley includes artifacts from the tunnel operation, including sections of the steel lining and examples of the recording equipment used to intercept Soviet communications. The Allied Museum in Berlin features a comprehensive exhibit on the operation, including a replica of the tunnel chamber and detailed explanations of the technical and political challenges involved in the operation. The legal processes that followed the exposure of George Blake and other Soviet agents involved in compromising Western intelligence operations provided important precedents for handling espionage cases and protecting intelligence sources and methods. Blake's eventual trial and conviction in Britain, followed by his dramatic escape from Wormwood Scrubs prison in flight to the Soviet Union, became one of the most famous espionage cases of the Cold War period. The legal proceedings revealed significant information about Soviet intelligence operations in Britain, while raising important questions about the balance between national security and civil liberties in democratic societies. The historical reassessment of Operation Gold that has occurred since the end of the Cold War has emphasized both its achievements and its limitations as an intelligence operation. Historians and intelligence scholars have recognized the operation as a remarkable technical achievement that provided valuable intelligence about Soviet military capabilities and political intentions, while also acknowledging that its compromise by George Blake limited its strategic impact. The operation has been studied as an example of both the potential and the risks of major covert operations, illustrating the complex relationship between intelligence gathering and foreign policy in the nuclear age. The influence of Operation Gold on popular culture and public understanding of espionage has been significant, inspiring numerous books, films, and television programs that have brought the story to broader public attention. These popular representations have varied in their accuracy and interpretation, with some focusing on the technical achievements of the operation, while others have emphasized the human drama of betrayal and deception that surrounded it. The popular cultural impact of the operation has contributed to public fascination with Cold War espionage, while sometimes obscuring the complex political and moral issues involved in intelligence operations. The technological legacy of Operation Gold has influenced intelligence gathering methods and capabilities down to the present day. The communications interception techniques developed for the operation contributed to the evolution of signals intelligence capabilities that remain important to modern intelligence agencies, while the engineering methods used for tunnel construction have been applied to various covert and military operations. The operational security procedures developed for the operation established standards that continue to influence how major covert operations are planned and executed. The diplomatic consequences of Operation Gold extended far beyond its immediate exposure, affecting relationships between intelligence agencies, military organizations, and government leaders throughout the remainder of the Cold War period. The operation contributed to Soviet perceptions of Western intelligence capabilities and intentions, influencing subsequent decisions about communications security, counterintelligence measures, and intelligence operations. The exposure of the operation also affected Western intelligence cooperation as agencies worked to improve security procedures and prevent similar compromises in future operations. The educational value of Operation Gold as a case study in intelligence history has made it a frequent subject of academic research and professional training programs. Intelligence agencies, military institutions, and academic organizations have used the operation as an example of both successful and problematic intelligence activities, analyzing its planning, execution, and aftermath to derive lessons for contemporary intelligence operations. The operation provides valuable insights into the challenges of conducting major covert operations, the importance of operational security, and the complex relationship between intelligence gathering and policy making in democratic societies. The ongoing relevance of Operation Gold to contemporary intelligence challenges reflects the continuing importance of signals intelligence and the persistent threats posed by foreign intelligence services to democratic societies. While the specific technical methods used in the operation have been superseded by more advanced technologies, the fundamental challenges of gathering intelligence about adversary activities and intentions remain central to national security policy. The operation's history provides important context for understanding contemporary debates about intelligence gathering, civil liberties, and the proper role of intelligence agencies in democratic societies. The story of Operation Gold stands today as one of the most complex and instructive episodes in Cold War intelligence history, a testament to both human ingenuity and human frailty in the pursuit of national security objectives. The tunnel beneath Berlin represented the convergence of cutting-edge technology, meticulous planning, extraordinary courage, and ultimate betrayal, creating a narrative that reveals fundamental truths about the nature of intelligence work and the moral challenges faced by those who operate in the shadows of international conflict. The intelligence gathered through the tunnel, despite its compromise, provided Western leaders with unprecedented insight into Soviet military capabilities, political decision-making, and strategic thinking during one of the most dangerous periods of the Cold War. The 443,000 conversations recorded in the tunnel chamber revealed details about Soviet atomic weapons programs, military deployments in Eastern Europe, and tensions between Moscow and its satellite governments that influenced Western policy decisions for years to come. The intelligence reports produced from tunnel intercepts contributed to assessments that helped prevent miscalculations that could have led to military conflict between the superpowers. The technical achievements, represented by Operation Gold, established new standards for intelligence gathering operations and demonstrated the potential for combining traditional espionage methods with advanced engineering and communications technology. The construction of a tunnel, nearly 1,500 feet long, lined with 125 tons of steel, and equipped with sophisticated recording equipment, represented an extraordinary feat of covert engineering that pushed the boundaries of what intelligence agencies could accomplish. The operational techniques developed for the tunnel influenced intelligence operations throughout the Cold War and contributed to the development of capabilities that remain important to this day. The human cost of Operation Gold, measured not only in resources and careers, but in the broader impact on trust and cooperation within the intelligence community, provides important lessons about the challenges of protecting democratic societies while maintaining democratic values. The betrayal by George Blake revealed the vulnerability of even the most carefully planned operations to insider threats, while the decision to continue the operation, despite its compromise, demonstrated both the value and the risks of major intelligence initiatives. The personal stories of the hundreds of individuals who contributed to the operation, from tunnel workers to intelligence analysts, illustrate the dedication and sacrifice required for intelligence work in the nuclear age. The broader historical significance of Operation Gold extends beyond its immediate intelligence value to encompass its role in the evolution of Cold War competition and the development of modern intelligence capabilities. The operation occurred at a crucial moment in the Cold War, when both superpowers were developing the technical and organizational capabilities that would define intelligence competition for the remainder of the 20th century. The lessons learned from Operation Gold, both positive and negative, influenced the planning and execution of countless subsequent intelligence operations and contributed to the doctrines and methods that guided intelligence agencies through the remainder of the Cold War period. The ethical questions raised by Operation Gold continue to resonate in contemporary debates about intelligence gathering, civil liberties, and the proper role of intelligence agencies in democratic societies. The operation required extensive deception, the violation of sovereignty, and the acceptance of significant risks to civilian populations, raising fundamental questions about the means that democratic governments should employ in pursuit of national security objectives. These questions remain relevant today as intelligence agencies adapt to new threats and technologies while maintaining accountability to democratic institutions and values. The legacy of Operation Gold serves as a reminder that intelligence operations, no matter how sophisticated or well-planned, cannot eliminate the fundamental uncertainties and moral complexities of international relations in an age of weapons of mass destruction. The tunnel beneath Berlin represented humanity's attempt to peer through the fog of Cold War competition and gain the knowledge necessary to prevent nuclear catastrophe. But it also demonstrated the limitations of intelligence as a tool for understanding and managing international conflict. The operation's ultimate compromise, by a Soviet agent, illustrated the persistent challenge of maintaining security while conducting the intelligence operations necessary for informed decision-making in a dangerous world. Drawn from declassified files and public archives, the story of Operation Gold reveals both the extraordinary capabilities and the inherent limitations of intelligence agencies in their efforts to protect democratic societies and maintain international stability. The tunnel beneath Berlin stands as a monument to human ambition, technical achievement, and the eternal struggle between secrecy and accountability that defines intelligence work in democratic societies. Its legacy continues to inform contemporary understanding of the challenges and opportunities facing intelligence agencies as they adapt to new threats while maintaining the trust and support of the societies they serve.